Good afternoon, everybody. Trip here on Black Friday 2025. While the chaos is unfolding in the retail establishments everywhere, I decided to stand off and stand back from it a little bit, take a bit of a nature walk out here because it's fairly warm. Breezy, but fairly warm for it being late November, even in central New Mexico. You know, like I keep hearing all the reports and everything talking about how it's going to be a absolutely brutally cold winter this year. And it's like, where's the winter? Do you see the winter? There is no winter. I don't know. Maybe it's different for those who live further up north in the country. I have a friend who lives in Minnesota and says that, she says it's absolutely frigid. But when is Minnesota not like that this time of the year? Anyways, what I wanted to talk about in this video was local politics. Local politics, local city planning, local civic society in 2025. Because I've noticed a lot of things. Now, I'm related to some local leaders in other parts of the state. Some of them are in city council, some of them are other. I'm not going to name names because I don't even know if they would want me mentioning them personally. One of them is a very strong Republican. I'm a very strong Democrat. We disagree on almost everything. But, family's family, all that kind of stuff. But it brings a lot of things to my attention. It brings to my attention the complete garbage that today's local politics and civic society actually is. One of the ways in which inspired me to talk about this a little bit was I woke up and I saw this news article. It has to do with Albuquerque. The government in Albuquerque, the city government, decided to allocate, I believe it was $6 million. I'll put the link in the description, to renovate an older building right off of Central. I think it's a hotel, or I think it was once a hotel. It was converted to an apartment complex. Like many old buildings, it has a very interesting character, high character and charming look to it. I myself am a preservationist. I like old buildings, and I like the idea of maintaining and preserving old buildings, because even when aesthetically pleasing newer buildings tend to just have this generic garbage, mass-produced McDonald's of the buildings kind of look. Okay, so you have a lot of people commenting in the comment sections on Facebook and elsewhere about how it should not cost, because this is what's really going to get you. $6 million to renovate staircases outside the building. Why the fuck would it cost, the language. Why would it cost $6 million to renovate staircases outside the building? Now, let's maybe there's a possibility that I'm a dummy on these matters and I don't know much about mass planning of architecture renovations, and maybe there's aspects to the whole planning side of it that I'm not aware of. Okay, I can, I can sort of say, okay, that's a possibility. But I have the most appalling feeling, like in many other cases, that what's actually going to happen is you're going to have pork barrel spending. You're going to have a lot of money just kind of hemorrhage and go nowhere, nothing be done with it, and then the end result of the construction project is going to be either an unfinished construction effort, which happens all the time in central New Mexico, all the time, or they will take off a bigger chunk of the old building than they should and revamp the whole thing, in which it will be unrecognizable. It will look like your typical modern generic trash, generic garbage, which will look just like every other new building around here. I don't know what it's like in other cities in terms of like what new buildings look like. But around here, it's awful. And what they're often doing is, if you like, they're proposing a whole host of plans in city council in Rio Rancho, Albuquerque, and I think even Santa Fe, where they want to, rather than preserve, they want to raise troubled buildings, and more than likely replace them with like these characterless, lifeless, abomination of brutalism, generic buildings. Some of them will probably never even see use. Because what I'm also seeing a lot is the city agreeing to dole out money, sometimes millions of dollars, to construction companies, contractors, all kinds of things. And then the money never ever actually, that was a lot of traffic. The money never ever actually goes where it's promised to go, and the end results of this pork barrel spending never ends up looking the way it should look. I don't know why I'm one of the only people that's talking about this. Now, Rio Rancho, most people who would hear that name would think, okay, what's this bumfuck mid-sized city in central New Mexico right outside of Albuquerque? Okay, it's not very different from any city in the United States of 100,000 people with that description, except that the city kind of sprung to life. Okay, it started essentially like almost like a real estate scam. The AmRep Corporation, they sold a bunch of lots to a bunch of unsuspecting old people back east. They misrepresented what the actual lots are. Then people bought them. They stayed in them. You know, they dubbed it Rio Rancho because it's like, oh, it's this fabulous fertile ranch land right by the river. Not quite what it is, but it's not quite what it isn't either. This place actually did have a ranch right by the Rio Grande at one time. Okay, the Rio Grande is a creek, but that's a different story. So it grows from there. And for several decades, it was just this like dusty little town. It had the reputation. It did have a very good reputation, not a prestigious reputation. People thought of it as the place you go to if you could not afford to hack it in Albuquerque. And I was like, okay, and they actually called it Rio Rat Hole. Oh, I hate when people say that. Not because it's not like somewhat descriptive, but because I just hate the way it sounds, right? But then you fast forward to the mid-1990s, and the city exploded. Absolutely exploded in growth due to the arrival of the Intel Corporation. Brought in a lot of jobs, brought in a lot of economic traffic. The problem is that the city did not know how to actually plan. So to this day, you've got this city that doesn't have a downtown. It doesn't have like a clear-cut city center. The city hall is located like way off in the desert with all these other large buildings that don't see a whole lot of traffic, a UNM branch location, that kind of thing. And it's just indicative of the failures in the U.S. Southwest, and I think elsewhere, of local politics and local planning. What the fuck is going on in our local politics sphere? Because it's like utterly dystopic, but in the most uninteresting kind of way. I mean, at least like something turning into Demolition Man or Judge Dredd or something in some ways would be a little more interesting, or Time Cop be a little more interesting, because you would have like, you know, flashy, shiny Jetsons in the making looking type infrastructure. Except we have all the boringness of a dystopia in local politics. But none of that, none of the shiny stuff. And it just, again, like I said, it seems to me that some of the most uninteresting, uncreative, just absolutely, they're completely unpopulist. Most of the people that make these decisions, they don't care at all about how anything affects the citizen. I mean, ask me, about what the Rio Rancho City Council was like and how they pushed the button to favor big business development projects over the common citizen every single time. But again, in the process, they are all incredibly uninteresting people. You ever go to a local city council meeting? It's nothing like in the movies. Like in the movies, there's like interesting, articulate dialogue and outbursts and concerns here, and sometimes news of passionate encounters that happen between this and that person in the political sphere. And it's like, think Dante's Peak, when the city council had the news broken to them that a volcano is about to erupt. Now in real life, you go to a local city council, it's just like, wow, my concern is that if the fence stays as is, there's going to be flood waters that might permeate into the lower base structure, and pursuant to section 205, on and on and on and on and on. But the point of what I'm saying, though, is that we have people like this, and they're making decisions every day that destroy the integrity of buildings with character, make our skylines, not that Albuquerque has much of a skyline, but make these places uninteresting, and simultaneously less affordable. And you get a lot of people that talk about the importance of voting and taking charge, taking part in the electoral process with regards to national politics and particularly presidential politics. And of course, I'm all for that. But you don't have enough everyday citizens showing an interest in local politics, even though we are absolutely getting taken for a ride and ripped off when it comes to local politics. And I think one of my missions in my political science journey and with my political science background is to try to figure out why. Because it's one of the spheres in which the everyday citizen actually might have some degree of immediate access. So do we want to keep seeing older buildings with character torn down and replaced with generic junk? Do you want to keep seeing strings of corporate businesses that don't benefit our local economies? Or do we want something a little more interesting, a little more diverse? But that's what I have to say for the moment. This is Trip signing off. Have a good Thanksgiving weekend.